If I could give it, I would, just so I could see you again. I'm standing out here on 10, I hope the time don't end. And I can make it back to my city and feel that soul on the tip of my hands. It's getting harder to breathe.
But yeah, to kick things off, thanks everyone so much for being here. Not only watching, but everyone on the panel. You're all dear to my heart in one way or another. And some people that I've just met, thank you so much for taking the time being here. It's truly an honor. Basically, I'm Jordan Smith. I own S Plus Management, which is a music artist management company based in Los Angeles. I personally manage Mitch and the KTNA girls on the panel. But everyone else, like I said, dear friends of mine. Annjie, I work with closely on the PR side. Danielle, we've known each other for a bit now. And then Melanie, we connected recently, who's from Music Forward. And then last but not least, my friend Malcolm here, who's going to be the host of the evening. We've known each other for years, great friend of mine. It's an honor to have you on the panel and kind of keeping us in check tonight. So that's really it from my end. I just want to, again, thank everyone for being here, kind of sit back and let Malcolm take over and let everyone speak and just enjoy. So thanks. Let's get it going.
Awesome. Jordan, the same way and the same reason that we became friends was music was the first thing that ever sparked a conversation between us. And that's been the commonality, that's been the common thread. And I think in that same name, that's why we are all here on this panel. So thank you to all the panelists. I'm just going to say thank you from myself because it's truly an honor to be on a panel and get a chance to speak to people. I'm fans of all of your work, and I can't wait to dive in. And I want to spare no time. As Jordan said, my name is Malcolm Alexander. I'm the host of On the Brink. We are a podcast platform based out of Long Beach, California, focused on the success, the mindset, and the faith of artists and entrepreneurs as they rise to their fullest potential. So I'm very excited to have amazing artists, entrepreneurs, nonprofits, movers, shakers, people that are pivotal and integral to what we see in the entertainment industry. And we are here to talk about mostly diversity and inclusivity. So thank you to everybody that got access into this room, of course, for the panelists, but for the people that want to be here, the fact that you're here is very important. In this conversation, thank you for even being willing to hold that space. And you're going to hear things that may be hard to hear, that may be easy to hear. But if there's any hope that I have, it's that you walk away from this panel better. And I would think that the panelists would think the same thing. So without further ado, we do have Representative Melanie Smith from Music Forward. Melanie, I want to ask you first, what is the work that Music Forward is doing as a national non-profit?
Well, first I want to thank you for having me. This is so great that you guys put this together. Music Forward, as you said, is a national nonprofit organization inside the House of Blues and Live Nation family. And our mission is to transform lives, inspire careers, and champion a more inclusive music industry. We do that by providing artist development, career development programs for youth to inspire the next generation of artists, leaders, and innovators. We offer free programs that connect young people to the music industry, including panels, workshops, mentorship, internships, and scholarships. We have begun our spring season, and our college scholarship application is open for a few more weeks, where students pursuing careers in the industry can receive $5,000 to $10,000 for the fall semester. So be sure to check that out for those listening. You can go to our site, hobmusicforward.org, or our socials, hobmusicforward. So I know that was a lot, but in a nutshell, that is the work that we do.
No, that's amazing. And that's integral work. So thank you for what you're doing. I think it's incredible that people can turn passion for music and passion for philanthropy into a viable career that you can be of service to others. So thank you for what you do. Why do you think that kind of work, or can you speak to why that kind of work and all the ways that it shows up for what you might do on the day-to-day, but why is the work that Music Forward and similar organizations, why is it so important and impactful in the entertainment industry?
I think the main thing is, we have to be the change that we wish to see. We can't just expect it to happen. In order for any real change to take place, it starts with the individual. It starts with us really crafting a vision and implementing it as individuals. So, from everything, I actually am an artist. I'm a songwriter by trade. I've had, I've been in the industry since I graduated school, and so a lot of the things that I create at Music Forward is from the lens of my, what I would have needed, what I needed, what I went through. As a Black woman, the cards were definitely stacked against me in a lot of ways. So, um, I think that in doing this work, it's really just to reverse some of that, or just make it a little bit easier for the next generation coming up. Make so they don't have to go through some of the things that I went through. So yeah, again, it's just we really do have to do the work. We have to create the change that we want to see.
I couldn't have said it any better myself. And those are experiences, and it's really hard, right? We're in a culture right now where it's so easy to gaslight, and it's really easy for people that may not look like us to say, "Well, here I can completely put my, I can put my feet in your shoes, and I can write a script, or I can write narrative for a Black woman, or I can write narrative or speak to the experience of it to a Black man or to a Korean man or to it, right?" And we realize that there's that authenticity is what a lot of this industry means if we don't have any equity to tell our own stories. And so I want to say that's probably why that kind of work that you do is so impactful. That way you can be in control of your narrative, and you can inspire other young women and young men to do the same.
Absolutely. Well said. I could not agree with you. Agree with you more.
No, I love it. Well, that's what this panel is about, right? And we want to create that discourse. Owning narrative is so important, and I want to jump right down to Annjie. You are a music publicist for Trend, and I want to ask you a little bit about your role with Trend as a publicist before I dive a little deeper and we can continue this conversation.
Yeah. Well, I'm currently the director of publicity at Trend. And, as a publicist, I think telling your story in the most authentic way is what's most important, controlling the narrative, I think, and especially with people of color, I think grabbing a hold of your story and telling it the way it needs to be told is one of the most important things you can do. Because a lot of the time in the industry, we'll see people just kind of sugarcoat or gloss over the things that people go through to get where they are. And I think especially in the music industry and entertainment as a whole, it just kind of overlooked that the reality is people of color have to work so much harder. And I think that we should be willing to hear those stories and not just be like, oh, well, that was just an obstacle. It is an obstacle, and it's something we should be willing to talk about.
Sure, sure. Well, can you speak to how laying an authentic foundation for artists of color, for Black artists, how might you advise even going about it? Or maybe where do artists see you on their journey? Right. I don't maybe know the best way. I don't, maybe in the 60s, right? It's like Aretha Franklin just had to get a demo tape to the radio. And maybe that's what meant her making it to the top. Now there's social media. Like, we can be in charge of our own narrative and be in charge of our promotion for as long as we want, for all we care. So where do people find your talents in their journey? And how do you advise Black artists and artists of color to even going to seek out that kind of support?
I think that PR in particular is a one stop right on your journey. We become a part of a team and a part of the foundation. But laying the groundwork yourself is so crucial because a lot of companies, and we've been really good about this at Trend, is they take advantage of people who are not in a position to afford PR, not in a place where they need PR. And I think it's really important, especially now with things like social media, that you take the time to hone in on your craft, do all that you can on your own, which is a lot, but you should, because when you don't and you hire in these people who really don't care, it's easy to fall through the cracks and have a team or a manager or people on your team who don't really care about you, your story, or what you're doing so much as trying to, take you for all you're worth, and then that's it. So what you really want to do is do the best you can in terms of creating your music, pushing it out there on social media, creating your brand, telling your story. And then if you get to a place where you can afford PR or a team, really do your research on, is this the type of person? What kind of stories have they told? What kind of work have they done with other artists? Is this a good fit? And the same with management and anybody that you hire on. And even if that takes a while, that could take years, but it's worth it in the long run rather than to be taken advantage of.
My goodness. Like I said, I never really know where artists meet PR on their journey, right? But it's so important to have storytellers in your corner that want to speak to your experience, make sure that the people see that authenticity rather than what they think is going to sell.
Absolutely.
Because time and time again, artists of color have had to sell our story rather than become our story and give our story and take hold of our story. And someone on our panel who does that just beautifully. I'm a new fan, so maybe this panel is my first chance to really meet this queen and to meet this woman. That is Rochester, New York's very own Danielle Ponder. How are you today, Queen? How are you?
I'm doing so good. Thank you for having me. Shout out to Jordan for initiating this as well.
Yes, all the way. The S Plus Management family. We appreciate them. I was able to check out your TED Talk. And one thing I did not know, I told Jordan, I said I want to know little to nothing almost about our my panelists because when I dove into your TED Talk, I said, "Wow, I thought it was just a singer. I thought it might have just been a little bit of R&B, and that's
Mhm.
not the story. You are a music artist and a public defender, and there's a part of your narrative that holds these two dualities that I don't think other artists might take that maybe burden or let's perspective switch, maybe that opportunity to truly hold on to this to these two lives of being both a music artist to inspire and be a public defender to inspire and defend. And in this TED talk, you said, "How often will you have to speak to men and women in cages before you forget that you're speaking to human beings?" What does that mean to you? And can you speak to how impactful and how chilling those words are as someone who has to ride these two lines?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, we get desensitized to how horrific our system actually is. The fact that there are people who are spending their life in prison for minor crimes or for drug related crimes. The fact that there's mothers and fathers who are taken away from their children, and just the collateral consequences that it also has on that child's life. And because prison has been so part of American culture, we have the highest incarceration rate in the world. We just kind of forget. We forget that these are real people, real families. And I would see that in court every day. Like, you sentence a 16-year-old kid without thinking anything. Um, so just the dehumanization process of being charged with a crime, being locked in a cage, and many people aren't talking about what's happening beyond the cell.
And that's also a part of I think hip hop culture, music culture, as you said, American culture. It is so normalized that it's almost something that there is that school to prison pipeline. This is not something fabricated. It's
Right.
not a joke, or it's not any of that. Like, how do you think maybe musicians, and not just musicians like yourself, but musicians in general, can leverage their voice to create greater change as what you're doing? As I don't I think you're an artist, but you're a servant.
Yeah, thank you. I think hip hop has talked about the criminal justice system and exposed it before anyone else was talking about it. I mean,
True.
NWA was saying F the police before any journalist wrote an article about what
Mm.
was happening in communities. So I think hip hop was at the forefront of criminal justice reform and change. It does feel like we've lost a little bit of that message in hip hop, but I think I always say I don't think black artists have to talk about politics. I
Mm.
think you have to do what's authentically you and what you need in order to survive. For some folks, just being black and dealing with the shit you deal with is enough. So maybe you want to write a song about dancing, and that's fine as well.
Yeah.
So I don't think we should put that burden on artists. But for me as an artist, it's an important part of my story. It's an important part of the music that I choose to write. And for other conscious artists, that's the same. But there will always be conscious artists. There will always be people elevating, social injustices. And hopefully one day there will be more, but I try not to judge people who don't take that path.
Yeah. It's hard when the writing or the narrative, right, can come at the expense of people that look like us, right? I want to change gears, and we're going to come back as I want to create a dialogue between all the panelists here. Marlon, our other panelist, he is here representing Hip Hop for Change, has joined into the panel. And I dived a little bit into Hip Hop for Change. And of course, brother, I want you to speak to all of that. But the coolest thing apart, I think that is a part of the fabric of Hip Hop for Change, right, is the acknowledgement of some of the evolution of hip hop has turned into a genre that is outwardly violent towards maybe the LGBTQ plus community, to Black women, and that narrative has perpetuated a cycle of darkness in our own community that now we do have to take that work, and we have to take the brunt of that work to make sure we can reverse those roles here in this industry. Can you speak to what Hip Hop for Change is doing to do that?
No, absolutely. And thank you all for allowing me to hold space with the rest of y'all. And it's a really, really great conversation from what I've seen so far. But I'm blessed to represent Hip Hop for Change as a nonprofit, as an Oakland based Black owned nonprofit 501c3. We've been around for 8 years. We just celebrated our 8th year anniversary. And we really started,
Congrats.
thank you for that. We really started as a means of trying to create a community based counter narrative to what we started seeing just as an organization, but also as a community, just started seeing in terms of the culture we love, the culture that I grew up with. I'm almost 40. I've grown up, born and raised in the 80s and 90s, having seen the trajectory of this movement that initially started as a party in the Bronx to not only create a safe space for young Black and brown kids to express their rage and their angst about a system that is marginalizing them, but also to initiate their own healing. Right. This is the position that we come from. Hip hop starts as this and grows over the last 47 going on 48 years to become a multi-billion-dollar industry that employs hundreds of thousands of people, but also gives a voice to the voiceless. But in seeing that trajectory, we've seen the corporate co-optation of the culture. We've seen the gentrification of the culture. We've seen the multifaceted narratives of Black and brown people become so narrow that now it excludes other marginalized communities, right? Unless you're talking about money and violence and um you're objectifying women, or you have women objectifying themselves, there's not really a place for you in mainstream hip hop, it seems, right? And what we've tried to do as an organization is create that community based counter narrative by holding space for progressive hip hop artists, by creating events in our communities, where we're bringing in thought leaders, educators, activists, and having dope hip hop shows, along with creating a platform for local artists to get recognized and for local artists to be seen. We have an FM radio station where we host a hip hop show that plays nothing but local artists. You're not going to hear, the mulattoes or the 21 Savages on this station. You're going to hear local hip hop artists who have something else to say other than what you're going to hear on the usual mainstream platforms. And having those kind of opportunities to do that is it speaks to what we're doing. But then also in the field of education, as we see hip hop start making inroads into politics, start making inroads into institutions of education, whether it's the Nas Fellowship at Harvard or Ninth Wonder doing classes at Duke University, or other schools in North Carolina, education field is starting to really respond to the entire idea of culturally responsive hip hop pedagogy, right?
Yeah.
Meeting children where they're at with a culture that they can identify with, that they have identified with, and giving them the tools to literally empower them to recognize your creative talent not only created the more predominant form of youth self-expression all throughout the world, but also is your key to getting out of your situation, be it poverty, be it racism. You can literally think and speak your way out of this situation. And it's not a new agey law of attraction, just will it to happen, but here's the game to get you out of it, right? Whether we're teaching in schools, kindergarten through 12th grade, or we're teaching in juvenile detention centers, this is the kind of work that we're doing. I'm a 39-year-old MC born and raised in New York City. Now, as a 39-year-old MC born and raised in New York City, all of mainstream hip hop will tell me I'm washed, right? Like no one's trying to hear no one wants to hear old men rap, right? So granted, that may be fair to say in certain spaces. I don't agree with it, but it may be fair to say.
I know I was shaking my head and I wasn't trying to be like, yeah, I'm like, that's what they would say. But Jay's still out here killing
but,
it.
Exactly. Yeah. There's people out there still, and there's a market for it. And we can get into that at another point. But the point I bring that up to say that doesn't dismiss the wisdom that people of that ilk have to empower the younger generation who are still vibrantly trying to keep this culture alive, but they need the game. Right. So what we've seen over the last 30, 40 years, almost since 1979, since the first rap record, you've seen this increasing wedge between rap music and the commodification of it and hip hop culture. So now you get artists who have no idea what the culture stands for. They have no idea the 5 elements, right? They have no idea of peace, love, unity, having fun. They have no idea of the founders or the pioneers that set the path that they're now walking on, right? We're in a generation now that's a multi-billion-dollar industry that's standing on the shoulders of giants, and they don't recognize that they're standing on those shoulders. They think that this is just where they started, right? So we're in these schools teaching these kids these principles, these elements, giving them, also themes of multiculturalism, of social justice, showing them like hip hop can be just as much used for twerking and turning up in the club as it can be used to overthrow abusive dictatorships in Africa. Right? Yes. It's a broad spectrum. And the issue at hand is not so much that, the big major labels took it over and now it's all violence and whatever. There's a gross disbalance. You know what I'm saying? I like to party like everybody else. I'll turn up just like everybody else do. But there's a gross disbalance now. It can't be just party and bullshit. Part of my language if we can't curse, but it can't be just that. There is a responsibility that we're holding to maintain this culture and to take it to the next level, to take it to teaching young kids how to be creative, to teaching how to organize and speak for what's right, and to stand on principles and values, and to have these conversations with regard to equity, with regard to ownership, and all of these different things. And we're seeing these cues from the OGs in the culture, right? But no one's talking about, they turned a corner in terms of their thinking first before they pursued that. They weren't still doing the same knucklehead things that they was doing when they was 20, 30 years old. They've been able to have the opportunity to grow, to mature, and now start imparting that wisdom. But there are OGs who are businessmen, right? Where's the celebration, and where are the spaces for the organizations and the educators all throughout the country and all throughout the world that are actually doing the work in the community, in these schools? You know what I'm saying? Whether it's private school, charter schools, public schools, whatever the case is, we're in here actively working with these young kids. Kids are accessible. They can see me walking the streets just as much as they can see anybody else. And I'm an MC just like, anybody else they could look up to. And we have that access. And I think that in this space, you're going to find organizations like Hip Hop for Change and others making the necessary reform in the community that is much needed.
I love that. And the biggest thing, right? You mentioned these younger artists standing on the shoulders of giants, right? And on the other side of that, with no equity. And you mentioned how that's a part of your narrative. And I think that's or that's a part of the impact that you're making with Hip Hop for Change, because that's what we need to see. This panel is hopefully for people watching. I'm hoping that you realize how important it is for you to, if you are in the room already, if you are in the space already, the only thing you should be doing is not to just empathize with people that might look like us or artists of color. You need to reach your hand down and bring us into the room. People that do not look like us cannot represent us, right. Especially in an industry and in a culture that we have built globally. right?
100%. It's more than just having a seat at the table. It's being given the opportunity to create your own table, to create your own
Yeah.
house, to create your own building, right? And
Yeah.
that's what we're trying to impart. We have a pipeline to positivity program where we're bringing kids out of juvenile detention centers and
Amazing.
alternative high schools and group homes, and we're teaching them how to be artists, how to take control of your narrative in a way
Yeah.
that's not toxic, in a way that's not going to reinforce the dangerous cycles that put you in the ill predicaments that you found yourself
Yeah.
in, but how to empower yourself as a community leader, as an entrepreneur, giving you those tools, giving you ownership of your masters, and coming in here. And if you're under age 24, we're building a state of the art studio in the heart of Oakland that
Yeah.
you can come and record for free. You know,
Yeah.
there's no more gatekeepers that are saying, hey, young blood, for $500, we can get you on this mixtape, like they're still doing to our young people now,
Mhm.
right? But we're saying, hey, you could come here and get whatever it is that you need to get off your chest. And we
Yeah.
can help you take control of that narrative and show you how you empower yourself in your community and heal yourself
Yeah.
from this. And use, you know, and we've done this. You know, we when COVID hit, we created an online course that basically took the bulk of our curriculum and created exclusive tutorials on a website so that we had a national outreach, right? So we now,
Amazing.
after 8 years, we've taught 25,000 kids, not only in the Bay Area, but all throughout the world. We were just in El Salvador last year before COVID hit, teaching kids who were reformed gang members down there the culture and the beauty of hip hop, whether it was breakdancing or emceeing. We were teaching teachers how to go back to their respective neighborhoods and create hip hop crews that can then empower and inspire their community. So now it's global, right? Not only this movement of ours of hip hop for changes, but the movement of hip hop to empower communities that need that voice and need that platform.
I love that. And you mentioned a global movement, right? And just the power of music. You talked about Uganda, my brother Bobby Wine, right? And the power of music to enact real change is so real. And again, we're speaking globally. I want to take it across the pond. It's a mad ting in it with the lovely Millie and Hope. Look. I've been working on it. I've been working on it. Better known as the artist, the KTNA. One, how are you, ladies? How are you?
Well, good, thank you. It's early in the morning for us, but we are very happy to have been invited and to be hearing all this amazing stuff. So thank you for having us.
Amazing. Well, I know it's like what 1:30 a.m.
Yeah.
Goodness. Look,
We're musicians, so we're used to it. Yeah. So it's not too bad. It's not too
I love
bad.
it. I'm like, yeah, you're artists. You do the overnight studio sessions. You're fine. You're fine. I almost was gonna throw you a bone. No. Well, I want to know. You know, when you see things on the television, when you see things happening globally, there's no way for artists that are aware like yourselves for that not to take a toll or have influence in your writing and in your stories. And you mentioned about the Grenfell Tower and how that's played into maybe some of the music, some of the art. Can you speak to maybe the impact and maybe how it's not being talked about and how that's maybe how that's intersecting with some of your music?
I mean, being Black and British is a very it's an interesting experience. I mean, there's a lot less Black people in the UK than there is in America, to start off with. So we kind of are marginalized further in our own kind of way. So that's always been in our music, kind of the frustration of feeling as though you have to be a certain type of artist if you're Black in this country. You have to make a certain type of music in this country. You have to look a certain way in this country. And, you know, the things that happen in the UK, I think people in the past year have made comments such as, you know, it's not, you know, you should be lucky that you're not American, and, you know, things aren't as bad in England as they are in America. People love to make that comparison, which is true. But it's another way of people being able to shut down the Black voices in the UK that have something very important to say. And like you said, Grenfell Tower, it happened a couple of years ago. A building in West London set on fire, a tower block full of poor Black people. That's the most important thing, is that these people were living, what's the American equivalent to it now? Like in the project. Yeah. So it's like a project building. It burned because it had illegal cladding on the outside, so that everybody inside perished. The government knew about this. The people that built the building also knew that the cladding on the building accelerated fire so that those people had no chance. And really what it just tells you is that if you're poor, black, or a person of colour in this country, that the government don't care about your safety. And even when something as terrible and as tragic as that will happen, they'll try and cover up and try and get away with as much as they can. And for example, they say that only, I think, how many people did they say died in Grenfell Tower? Like 80 people. I think they said that 80 people had died, but we actually used to live in the community where Grenfell was, and to this day, hundreds of people, they say, died in that fire, and 80 is not accurate. And if only 80 people did die, then where are all these people's friends, parents? And it's been shocking, and it's been a real eye-opener. Another scandal in this country that happened was called Windrush. I don't know if you heard about it in America, where they tried to, all the first generation Jamaicans that came to this country after World War II, they tried to get rid of them quietly and send them back to Jamaica after living here for 40, 50, 60 years. They tried to do that last year or the year before that. To do it on Christmas Day this year. Yeah, and they tried to really brush it under the carpet and make it look like it didn't happen, but there were thousands of people who were getting these letters who've been here in this country for 40 years that built this country back up from the ground up, and they tried to send them back to Jamaica. And I think, you know, what happens in America, it does get the world stage in that sense. As terrible as it is, it gets the world stage. But I think in the UK, there's like a kind of polite racism that goes on in our media, in our culture in general, to be honest with you. It's not as outright and brash as it is in America. And, you know, thankfully for that, thank God. But also it is racism in another way. We do also experience our own, as Black British people, we experience our own form of racism. And we used to live actually in Atlanta. We lived in Atlanta for 3-4 years on and off. So I do actually understand American culture, and living in Atlanta was so beautiful to be around Black people, so many Black people. It was a Black community, and we just don't have that in this country. We've never had anything like that in this country. And it was the first time I had ever seen a Black middle class. Yeah, that's another thing. Black middle class does not exist in this country. And living in Atlanta really gave me perspective on what is really missing from England. And there is no Black middle class in the UK. There isn't. Even in terms of what we were speaking of earlier, of being able to have equity, and you were saying that these people cannot represent us, white people cannot represent us, they cannot tell our stories. Well, in the British music industry, that is how it goes. We don't get to see Black executives very often. You know, if you go into an office full of 30 people, there'll be 2 Black people, but one of them will be mixed race, and one of them will be Black. You know what I mean? It'll be a Black man, it won't be a Black woman. And we see this over and over again. And so to be a Black British artist is very difficult. We were told you look too Black and intimidating. I'm a mixed race person, you know what I'm saying? So can you imagine to be a fully Black person in this country to try and make music? It's incredibly difficult. Incredibly difficult.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't even imagine. And I think about how many, you know, actual Black artists we have that are coming out of the UK right now. It's always far and few between. And I think what, you know, in almost a mirror of America, when you do, you see how they might look, right? It's like, I think like Arlo Parks is like, that's a new favorite of mine, right? But how oftentimes do we get like a dark-skinned artist?
Don't. Like the UK loves mixed race people. The UK loves mixed race girls. And I'm a mixed race person. I'm okay with saying that. I understand that we have this massive colorism thing that goes on in this country. And to be honest with you, whenever I see like the new mixed race girl and she can't really sing, but she's pretty and she's sexy and she's doing a thing in the video, I just think shame on us. Yeah. Shame on us. We are doing this over and over and over again. And it's because mixed race people are the acceptable. We are Black people. Like white people in the UK can palate mixed race people. They can take mixed race people. But Black people, not really that much. No. There's still a massive prejudice. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that's that's same. That's something that both nation share. How do
Right.
you, with with your art, with who you amazing women are, how do you plan to change that tide for the better in this industry? Or how do you think we can change it for better?
I think the first thing is talking about this colorism issue that we are currently, and we always have been experiencing, let's just be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Talking more openly about it, asking ourselves, why don't we see successful Black women and Black men on our TV screen as artists in the UK? Why aren't we seeing that? Because they exist. I work with them every day. I see them all the time. We go to the same studios. We know the same people. We're around each other. But it always seems that there's a cap. And why is that cap? And I think it's important that as an industry to try and help change is that the industry must try to employ, not try, they must employ Black people in their offices. And I don't mean one or two. I don't mean one mixed race girl, one mixed race. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying diversify your offices. It has to be that way so that we can, because as you said, these people cannot represent us. White people cannot represent us. I need to go into an office and see a Black man and know he knows what I'm talking about, or know he knows what he's talking about. And I think also it's the thing of bringing other people through. We've got to like shine a light, like on other talented people that are Black. And we have to, and we have to champion them. And as soon as before you said reaching down and pulling other people up when we get up, there's not enough of that. I don't think at the moment. And I think it really needs to be something that is worked on.
I absolutely adore that. We're gonna even get into it more real soon. I want to make our way around the panel. KTNA, thank you, ladies, so much. And in the name of representation, I always feel like we get the Idris Elbas over here, we get Damson Idris over here, we get Daniel Kaluuya. I just want to be on the BBC. I'm going to work on my accent. I want to be just, and look, and I know our next panelist I'm going to talk to, I know, he's good looking, my brother Mitch. Look, I'm just saying, I think we're next up to be at the BAFTAs. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to be next up. I'm going to work on my British accent. I'm going to get it together. I know he's going to do the same. I'm talking about none other than hip hop artist Hoodie Mitch. How are you doing today, King?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm serious, dude. Like, look, we got the British buddy cop movie thing going. You know what I'm saying? We got the good natural hair going. Look, we'll work with the KTNA. They'll be producers. They'll co-produce. S Plus Management's gonna step in. They'll do the soundtrack. We'll get it together.
Let's do it. I'm down.
I love it. I want to know, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Taking every day as we should. It's a blessing, to be alive. I'm doing good. It's taking in every left and right turn. You feel me? And just trying to see how we could take the narrative.
Definitely. You released a song last year during the protest called Season 25. And it's one thing for an artist to release a song that's charged or release an album that's charged by social injustice or civil unrest. But that's a common thread. That's a commonality with all of your music. And not to say that all of your music always has to be conscious, but it's one of those things that I feel like, how can it not? And it just exists within you. Can you speak to the work that artists have to do on a consistent level rather than just, I don't know, following the social justice trend? Because it's cool to talk about, Black Lives Matter today, but maybe tomorrow we can go back to the club music. Can you speak to why consistency in this work is actually important?
It's realizing that the fight honestly has to be consistent. The fight to regain the narrative has to be consistent. Growing up in New York, like my mom, she was very smart. She moved us to White Plains from the Bronx, and that's a big thing to do, especially coming from the projects, and she worked in Wall Street, and she got us to a place where we could live and not be a statistic, right? Or try to stray far away from being a statistic. And growing up in White Plains, you will get one picture of the image, or you get one picture of what the narrative for people that look like us are. And as I would go visit like my father lived in the Bronx, lived in Pelham Parkway. I would get stopped on the street nonstop just because of my appearance. I would get stopped nonstop at the subway just because of my appearance. And I would get shaken down because at a time point, at 20, after 2013, stop and frisk was a big thing, especially in the boroughs of New York, which was then found unconstitutional. It was a big thing. These cops would pat down female friends that I had with me, you know, pat us down. Then they would see my ID and see that I'm from White Plains, New York. Whole narrative would change. Oh, it's okay, go. It's all right. Because they know that I live in Westchester. So now it's a different narrative, right?
Yeah.
So then I went to the Marine Corps, and then being in the Marine Corps in the South, you see a lot, you know, but you're a Marine, you're fighting for your country, but you're still in the South, you know. So when the weekend comes and you have that time to have, you know, freedom, it's called libo, when you have time to, you know, actually go out, you can see the divisions of that narrative again, right? You know, I'm a Marine, but I'm also Black, and I'm Black in the South. So we go out to get drinks, and the bar is majority white. I'm getting the looks not because I'm not a Marine anymore. I'm just Black. So once again, the narrative that I'm fighting to change has changed against me, right? I get out the Marine Corps. I move out to California. It's the same exact thing, you know, going to college out here, professors will try to illuminate your Blackness for the class, right? Trying to change the narrative, right? So I realized as an artist, making music has been something I've done my whole entire life. And I had to find my voice because I wanted to be able to change the narrative. You know, I was big on poetry, you know, Langston Hughes. I was big on poetry growing up. And I had a friend to say, hey, man, why don't you change the way in which you're, you know, being heard or putting across your message into something that will be relatable to not just one crowd, but to everybody, right? So I was like, all right, hip hop. And that's something I've actually been able to, you know, successfully do, you know, thanks to my manager out there. But it's something I've been able to successfully do, especially because my publicist over there. It's realizing that I own the narrative, right? And only I can change that narrative. I can't, someone's always gonna have a belief of who I am until I change the narrative, you know, until I make my voice known. So through everything that I make, every piece of art that I make, every song that I make, I have to make sure that I'm re-owning that narrative. You know, I have to make sure that somewhere in that music, someone is listening to a story, not only a story that is from myself, but people that look like us. You know, J. Cole said one thing, you know, he doesn't always speak from his personal, you know, experiences in life, but he speaks from the people around him. Because now he has a voice. He can change that narrative to the world. For Your Eyes Only, that whole project changed the narrative. You know, you went to the show out here in LA, and there's a lot of, you know, it's a mixed audience. There's a lot of white folk there, there's a lot of Black folk there, there's a lot of Latinos there. It's a mixed audience, and everybody is there soaking in the narrative. Is soaking in what it's really like, not just coming from one side of the track, but showing it in a full spectrum. You know, so I think that's my purpose. You know, my mom's probably watching this, so this is my purpose.
Hey, Mom.
You know, this is to, I think my main purpose, especially in music, if not only in music, is to re-own the narrative and to share that same goal with those that are like-minded and have the same color. You know, I feel are the same race. I feel like if we all have that mindset, then we can truly change the narrative.
I love that. I love all of that. What do you hope people take away? And this is going to be a question for the whole panel that I do want to get around to. What do you hope listeners or anyone new, or even someone that's already a fan of yours, what do you hope that they take away from a moment with Mitch? Maybe that's listening to a song. That might be an album, right? For you, it's going to be music. What do you hope people take away from a moment with you?
That definitely living in the now, you know, living in what we can do now. You know, I think if anybody has the time to listen to my music, they'll definitely understand that this comes from, like, every piece of my music comes from a piece in time of myself. You know, a mindset more so, you know, in which I had to find the key. You know, so I want to say every song, every, you know, time you get a chance to listen to my music, it's more so a piece to the puzzle.
Yeah,
You know?
I love that. I want to ask the same question to Ms. Danielle Ponder. What do you hope people that listen to you, new fans, old fans, what do you hope a moment with your music or a moment with your work will leave them with?
I just took a bite of chocolate because I was like, I'm not going to be next. God, I think when my dad's a pastor, and when people would leave for church after his sermon, they would all shake his hand and talk about the message that they got from his sermon and how they felt better, than they did when they walked into the church. And I think that's like the same thing I always want to do for folks is hopefully they feel like there's a personal message for their life, right? That will impact their life, that will inspire them in some way, and not only inspire them towards activism, but inspire them towards the personal things that they need to change in their own life. Um, so yeah, I think I want people to be thinking and feeling deeply when they leave, and also just feeling fully alive when they're at a show. I want to offer an escape from people, from everything, especially in this pandemic that we experience every day. Like I always want that hour or 2 hours to be a moment where time kind of stands still and we are, collectively one living, breathing organism. And yeah, that's kind of my purpose.
I absolutely adore that, and I did want to take a moment earlier. The KTNA were talking about Grenfell Tower, and you mentioned ahead of us opening up this panel, and I just want to make sure that we're also giving a voice to injustice that is happening. But you mentioned that there was video evidence of a mother and a child being pepper sprayed, of course, for no reason, right? Like let's not just say like there needed to be a reason behind it. And you said there's not just that one incident, that it's been happening. And if you did want to shed light on that to make sure that the word is heard about what that is, I would love to give you just the floor to do that right now as well.
Yeah, just quickly, about 3 weeks ago, there was a 9-year-old child that was pepper sprayed by our police. And then this morning, we wake up and there's another video of officers approaching a woman who they suspect to have stolen something. She didn't steal anything. Um, Tackled her to the ground in front of her 3-year-old child, pepper sprayed her and her child. And we are just dealing with an abusive police force, but we've been dealing with an abusive police force in Rochester, New York for decades. I'm at the point where I don't see any path to reform, and it's time to abolish our police department. They killed a man last year. They've killed people before. They killed a woman, Denise Hawkins, who I always bring up because she was a DV survivor and she was literally running from her abusive boyfriend into the officer's arms, or so she thought, and she was shot dead. And it's just like, enough. Our mayor says implicit bias training. No, enough is enough already. And our community deserves to have a system that truly protects them, and we deserve it for it to be our people and not outsiders who have white supremacist values. So that's what's happening in Rochester, but I think that's happening in cities all over the country. And it's really time for us to take abolition seriously, and know that the most creative people in the world, can create a new system of public safety.
I love that, and thank you once again for your work. This will not be the last time. Eat more chocolate. Get comfy, okay? Because
Thank you.
I want the audience to ask more questions. I want to ask more questions. I'm sure some of the panelists might have questions, but I do want to get around. I want to go to Miss Melanie with Music Forward. Lasting impact. What do you hope people can take away from your work that you are doing as an agent of change? But yeah, most importantly as well, Music Forward.
You know, really it's just the main thing is to really create pathways into the music industry for a diverse group of people. Because as we know, music has an effect, it's played such a large role in everyone's life. I think that the people behind it, the people crafting, the people who are delivering, who are choosing the artists, who are choosing the music, who are choosing the content that's put in front of us, that is shaping our culture, it really matters. Um, it's As we can see, from the sorry, my son is part of this conversation now as well.
Yes, we love it. We love it.
But as we know, the impact that even the pipeline, the prison pipeline, what the role that hip hop has played in that, and who were the decision makers behind that. Um, we know why it's important to have diversity in those boardrooms, in those rooms, making those decisions. Just from a gender equity point of view, women are consuming music pretty much. They're the main consumers of music, and we are not in a lot of these creative rooms. We're not shaping a lot of this music, and so just it's just important. It's just important on so many levels. So I think the main takeaway, is to just keep fighting the good fight, keep creating pathways, keep creating opportunities. If you are a decision maker, if you are in these rooms, open it up. Diversity is good for everybody. Diversity is good for all, and that's really it. Just be cognizant. It's not just about equity. Is about it involves humanity. Equity and equality. It involves all of humankind. So that's why it's very important.
It involves all of us. I absolutely adore that.
Mm-hmm.
As well as Prince, your son, with his eloquent words as well. So, no, thank you. There is a lasting impact. I want to switch, and I want to go to Miss Annjie Houston as well. Again, lasting impact. And you spoke so fervently about representation and owning the narrative. Do you have allyship do's and don'ts? And I want to go around actually the whole panel and get some of that as well, because last year we were talking about here are people in these boardrooms, right? And we're this is during the Black Square time, right? And that my feelings on that is already just it's very triggering to consider that as post a Black Square, and exactly you're down. But like there's a way for us to show up. And there's a way for people that do not look like us. There is a way to show up, to show togetherness, to show solidarity, to show true inclusivity and authenticity. How can we? What are the do's and don'ts maybe for allyship?
So this topic, I think, as a whole, I don't even know if I like the word allyship when thinking of this, but like, it is not the responsibility of Black people to lift other Black people up. Like, we are not the gatekeepers. It is not your job as a musician, as a person of color, to talk about the issues you face every day. As Danielle so eloquently said, that's not our work. The work that needs to be done is real work, and it's about being in a position of power, in a position of privilege, and opening up that space for other people. Like, imagine, I guess, like we're all in an ocean and they have all the lifeboats. It's not about giving a lifeboat to one person and hoping that they can fill it with as many Black people as they can and go from there. You
Sure.
know, it's not the job of one person who makes it, like for instance, Issa Rae, who's so lovely, you know, does her the best she can to lift up the people around her, but it's not her job. It's not, you know, the people around you need to open up those spaces and do the work that it takes, and not and the emotional labor, because it's emotional labor as a Black person and an entertainer to be like, I want to talk about all of these things that I go through every day. You don't, maybe you don't, and that's not, and that's like, that's okay. So I think the job is not to be like empathetic or to watch and just be, it's to take action and to not hope that you're going to get some reward for that action, to hope that people are going to pat you on the back for doing this thing. You know, you just do it because it's right, and because you know that if you don't do it, somebody else probably won't do it either. You know, it's just, it goes on and on. It's a cycle. So it's like, you have to take responsibility for the power that you have, like a Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility.
Yes.
You have to take that on. You're in this position of power and you need to use that power, and you don't need to expect a reward for it. You just do it. And if you're not going to do it, then just be quiet and keep doing what you're doing, and allow for the people who want to do it to take up that space.
I couldn't have said it any better. Look, Annjie, more questions for you real soon. I want to go back across the pond and go to the KTNA. Lasting impact, a moment with Million Hope. What do you hope most that people can take away?
Oh, do you want to go first? Okay, so I guess for me, our music is very much centered around living in your own truth and coming to terms with that, no matter how dark or grisly it may be. Being able to look in the mirror and be proud of whatever it is you see looking back at you. It's about leaning into your own pain. Yeah. And finding something beautiful in it. It might not be perfect. It might not be very comfortable for a person, but it's about trying to channel your pain and make it into something a little bit better than just being pain sat on your heart. For me, that's what it is. And I think for me, it would be the fight to give the good fight the good fight, and carry on fighting the good fight for as long as you possibly can. And that should be forever. I don't think anyone should ever give up on themselves or what they believe in. I think that's what I'd like for people to take away from, is that we've always given the good fight, and for as long as you know us, we'll always give the good fight. That's what I want you to take away. Don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on your dreams, and fight for what you believe in at all times. At all times.
At all times. I absolutely adore that. I want to ask the same question to it's Marlon or Marlon? Marlon, correct? Okay, very good. Mr. Marlon Richardson, lasting impact. What do you want people to take away from the work that you are doing? And again, it's a double question, because it's you and Hip Hop for Change, right? Because you have this autonomy, and I love how passionately you speak about being an MC at your age, right? To say like, no, here's game I got for y'all little ones, and I need y'all to listen, right? Because look, we say it, man, like they ain't listen to grown folk enough, right? They hard headed, right? So
yeah, but what I would say, not to cut you off, is that the same time the OGs are hard headed in not wanting to give that wisdom. Right? We have to take accountability for ourselves. We sit as armchair revolutionaries in many cases and complain about the youngins, and we're not in the field talking to them. You know what I'm saying? We're not pulling them back from the ledge of self-destruction that the road is clearly paved for young Black people. Right? The road is clear in terms of self-destruction for ourselves. They've created an entire system and societal dynamic for us to have all the tools to destroy ourselves, while creating a consciousness paradigm that keeps us from empowering ourselves to walk back from that ledge and recognize, like, oh no, we're going the wrong way. Here's the other way to go. So to answer your question with regard to lasting impact, it's a matter of using American history and American present to inform American future. using hip hop history and hip hop present to inform and pave the road for hip hop's future, which in my heart of hearts is honestly hip hop culture is the vanguard for the spiritual and political revolution and evolution of humanity. It's the one movement that we have in society that can collectively encompass all cultures, but through this lens of the black and brown experience, because of what we've endured as a people. You know what I'm saying? Whether it's in the United States, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in other places, the things that we've endured collectively frames the road for how to create empathy, right? And we're not going to get to where we need to go until we have developed that level of empathy and compassion that puts us in touch with all other things, with other human beings, right? We have to kind of remove those blockages. America as a whole needs to heal. Us as individuals need to heal. I was reading a meme the other day that said, you have to heal yourself so your children don't have to heal from you. You know what I'm saying? So and as a person who is going through my own like existential things, is like, yo, that's real. You know, so we have to kind of start thinking about that. We have to start learning the cues and reading the cue points that are going to help us step into our humanity. And when you go through that rabbit hole of exploring and stepping into your humanity, you're going to realize that your humanity is divinity. And that divinity comes from empathy. It comes from compassion to put you in tune with other things so that we can feel unified. We're not going to feel unified if we continue to compartmentalize ourselves, exist in our own political and social echo chambers where we think we're right and anybody who doesn't have our opinion is wrong or they're off course. It's a matter of having the dialogue, having those uncomfortable discussions and working through them to come on the other side of that more fully evolved, to have grown. So it's having the lasting impression and the legacy of hip hop culture is that we are the vehicle for how human beings will evolve politically, socially, but also consciously. You know, so whether it's education or me getting on a beat, you know, my artist name is Unlearn the World, right? Like it's a mantra. I get this from the movie Higher Learning and the song The World Is Yours by Nas. Like it's a mantra of mine. And the messaging in my music is just that. It's I don't have the answers, but I'm gonna chronicle my journey so that you can find a connection in that journey and you can walk this journey with me so that we can come out both on the other side healed, evolved, and ready to take it to the next level, ready to pass that torch. But if you can't pass a torch if you don't know how to handle the fire. You know what I'm saying? So we're starting to learn how to handle the fire. We're starting in various aspects to unlearn our world and to heal ourselves. And once we've crossed that Rubicon, we'll see amazing things. We will be able to manifest amazing things in our world and beyond.
Oh my wait, I'm sorry. We got to rewind the bar. I need the mixtape. I need the album. I need the EP when it drops because that was a fire 64. That like it didn't have to rhyme. It was just spoken. I'm gonna snap to it. Did I hear that our humanity or our divinity is in our humanity?
Yes, that's yeah. So when we find our humanity, we realize that it is divinity. That's
yes.
We've been working historically at a subpar level of what it is to be human. And when you recognize what it truly is to be human, that's when you understand divinity. You understand that, it involves empathy and being in tune with other human beings, being in tune with other living things.
Yeah.
You know, the reason our planet is in disarray, right, is because of our lack of empathy. Right. The world is telling us something. COVID-19 is that's the earth telling you something. Right. If you haven't learned in the last year in your isolation and your disconnection, how that we need to grow from the inside out. If you haven't learned it by now, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what train you need to get on to really get to the space that this is the world telling you, stop what you're doing. It's not helping you. It's not helping the earth. We need to slow down. Reflect, go within so that we can move forward in a way that's more empathetic and more unified.
Yeah. The true mantra, right? To recognize that God is inside of us, right? It's not 100%. Outside of us. Infinity, and it is inside of us, right? We do not have to we do not have to seek an outside source for that validation. We have when we acknowledge that divinity inside ourselves, Marlon. I absolutely adore the sentiment. We're gonna round out. I see we have a few questions from the audience. We'll work it around. Once again, I'm Malcolm Alexander, and if there's any questions, please put them in the chat for our incredibly eloquent, amazing panel. Just just gems dropped. You know what I'm saying? You never want to be the smartest person in the room. This is one of those things today where I'm just like around all these amazing. I'm looking at myself in relation to everyone in the Zoom room. This is amazing. But Daniel DeBarge, he asked, do you have any books that you've read that have helped solidify your life's purpose? He says that he would love to add some of them to his 2021 reading list. So I will open form that can go for anybody. Any books that have aided in your life's purpose? I know for me, I could say The Alchemist.
You took mine.
No, look. Read it again this year.
I would also say the autobiography of Malcolm X. I think there's no better story of transformation in the 20th century than the autobiography of Malcolm X.
Couldn't agree with you more.
I definitely would say The Alchemist as well, and The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz is another one.
I have that in my Amazon wish list right now, so I'm gonna pull the trigger on that one today. Now that you said The Four Agreements, indeed. Okay, no worries then. Oh, look, Daniel said he just read The Four Agreements. Yeah, see, okay, so now I'm the one that's behind. Any other books before we move on to the next question?
Also, I think it's by the CEO and founder of Netflix, but it's called No Rules Rules. And that in the whole entire book, it just kind of breaks down the proper way to conduct yourself in like the business setting, but also how to build a company that thrives. And I feel as though for our race, especially for us to get to the level that we need to be, like Jay-Z, for us to get to that level without the arts. But I feel like we need to kind of, books like this kind of definitely help in setting down the groundwork to build a good company.
I love that. I absolutely adore it. The panelists, does any other panelists have a question for a fellow panelist by chance?
This isn't a question, but I do have two books that I would recommend for everybody. And the first one is one I read, and it's more of like a workbook and a book, and it's called The Artist's Way. I'll try to find a link so I can put it in there. But it really is about coming to love your art and yourself simultaneously. So being creative and not feeling like your art is hindering you or it's painful, but just really coming to terms with loving that creative part of yourself and treating it with kindness, which I thought was very, very helpful. The other one I would recommend, and this is just strictly financial, but it's very helpful because especially if you're an artist and this is what you want to do with your life, it's important that you have your finances in order so that when you get to a place that you can start putting that money towards your work, that you have the resources to do so. And that would be, I Will Teach You to Be Rich. And I will also put that in the chat. And it's very helpful because it breaks down finances in a very easy to understand way, but very, very simplified, but it doesn't sugarcoat anything, like what you need to do to be able to save for specific goals. And I think that's very helpful too.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you. We have the S Plus Management Chat for Change book club. We'll make sure that all those references are thrown up. That's amazing. Questions panelists might have for other panelists and or books. I'm keeping it free game right now. And if anyone from the audience has more questions, please.
I have a question. To the other artists on this panel. Because we were talking about ownership earlier. Oh, are we on mute? No. Oh, nope, sorry. Because we were talking about ownership earlier. I wondered how the other artists on this panel felt about signing, because we haven't really touched on it, as Black people signing record deals, and whether, because for me, my stance is now is that record deals are inhumane. They should never have been made. It's like modern slavery. We've just carried it on. It's disgusting. I think my stance is now is that I don't want to sign a record deal. I'm not going to. This trend has got to end. But I wondered what it was like on the other side of the pond, as you said, and whether anybody else felt that way, or whether anybody thinks there's different ways or better ways to get your music out there. And if anyone thinks it's actually a positive, yeah. If anyone thinks it's a positive, yeah.
I mean, I personally feel, I think that record deals are, in some sense, can be very lucrative, can also help, unless we can't, speak on our own terms. If we can't, stipulate the terms, if we can't have a hand in how our future is being built, then no, I think that it's better to grow that from the ground up independently. But I do feel is if you have the opportunity to sign with, UMG, I'm not signing unless I can make my own demands, unless I have my own masters, unless I own my masters. I don't want to sign anything or make a deal like that where I relinquish my own freedoms or I relinquish my future to somebody who has their own future made out for me.
Well, can I ask you a question? For example, do you think it's fair that they would take 80% of your earnings and give you 20, and with that 20, you have to pay back your advance? And
no.
But questions that I have to ask, because I think as Black people, we honestly need to stop doing this shit, because I really do. I believe, and I agree with you in every way, that it does help, it does enhance, but that's due to money, right? That's due to a massive amount of money. And we have to pay that massive amount of money back before we make our 20%, before we make even our 20%. And out of that 20%, I've got to pay 2 million back. We're going to be here for a long time, boys, aren't we?
Yeah. And but see, that's what I'm saying. And that's what I'm saying. That's why I believe, unless you can make those terms yourself, it's not lucrative. I feel like the last 20 years or from the inception of hip hop or R&B, it's been taken. It's been given away, and then we take the little crumbs from it and try to build from there.
Right.
I hold Jay-Z in high esteem because of the things that he was able to do with his record deals.
Yeah.
From the beginning, Roc Nation made it known that they were different from Def Jam.
Yeah.
They made it known that, hey, this is us. Roc Nation is Roc Nation. And we're not going to stand for any bullshit that you try to give us. We're not going to take it. And that's where I guess Dame was really abrasive in that. But you need a Dame sometimes.
Yeah.
You need a Dame so people can take you serious. If Dame wasn't there, Lior probably would have taken Jay-Z in a whole nother direction.
Mm-hmm.
But then Jay-Z became the president of Def Jam. Now Jay-Z is one of the leading and one of the most valuable hip hop artists to ever live because he stipulated his own terms.
Right. Yeah.
Even Nipsey.
I feel though it's a privilege that's only afforded to very few people. There's the being able to build your own imprint off a huge corporation's already massive footprint in the ground. I think it is something that, to be honest, I don't think is really talked about enough, but that's why I feel like it's kind of dangerous, because unless you are that one in a million, you will be ending up owning not a lot at all, but you may have a cash flow of 2 million on paper. And I think it's really, for me, it detracts from art and what the stories we're trying to tell. I don't know if you feel differently. And, just the fact that if we're making this stuff, we should be able to own this stuff. It should be ours. It should be our flag in the ground. We were here. This is us. This is what we do with our lives. And so, I just wanted to It's a good question to
Yeah.
ask. I also think
Yeah.
it's a really serious thing that we've done for a very long time. Like lots of our black artists for a very long time, like Motown or Cadillac Records, where people used to get given a bloody car for £1 million song. You know what I'm saying? We've done this for a very long time, and you've got to know that as a person who loves black music, I don't want all of my black favorite musicians to have been miserable with no money and feel like they're enslaved by a massive company. It's something about that makes the music that I listen to really sad from, say, from the 60s or the 70s, because I know that some white guy somewhere in some estate is making loads of money off that, and they just got given a Cadillac. I think that we really need to look at it and deal with it as a community and talk about it. That's why I wanted to talk about it with amongst other artists, because I think it's something that we should do.
But I think that's crazy in itself, you know, like that, and that's a narrative that's known across the spectrum, that especially for African Americans,
right?
You know, if you go to the NFL, if you go to the NBA, if you go to baseball, all of this, it's all like, I'm gonna send a scout to this neighborhood in the projects, you know, and then when we find that 1 in a million in the projects, let's take him and then profit off of his blow up, you know, like for like, if you a lot of artists, especially younger artists, you know, 20 years old, 19 years old, 18 years old, 17 years old, that are living in the projects, right, that are going through war every day with people that look like them and people that don't. You know, they're going to war every single day. People are seeing this from the outside, right, and offering these kids $50,000. I'm gonna give you $50,000, but I want to own your narrative. I want to own your story. You know, NBA YoungBoy, he signed to a deal. No matter if he's still in the trenches, no matter if he's still in the street doing his thing, he's signed to a record deal where he has to give up a certain amount of albums that discuss what he's going through or what his trials and tribulations have been through, so that the record label can get the majority of that profit, and then give the trickle down, you know, because if you're a rapper, especially a rapper that's coming out of the slums or coming out of the projects, right, you have a core following, right? That core following is going to follow you everywhere. So if you go on tour, then give the artist all that tour money. You know, then he can have all the tour money and all the money that he makes from merch. Yeah, he can have all that. But we're going to own all the music. And I think a lot of artists were stuck on that, stuck on, hey, I'll take the tour. I'll take the merch money. And that's good enough for me.
Yeah.
You know, getting paid $2 million, you know, 6ix9ine. I don't even mean to be mentioning him. But his deal is a deal that doesn't only happen in the projects. That same deal that happened, you know, that same deal happens with record labels, where they're working to be the biggest artist in the world, but yet someone is bigger than them taking in all their earnings. If they're making $2 million at doing this show, making $2 million at this tour, the record label's taking in 50.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and that's what I mean. We have to own the narrative. You know, we have to set our own stipulations. We have to stipulate the terms, or it's okay. You know, like what do you call it? Logic, when he started his whole image, he went to a record label, and a record label said, hey, you're worth this much. Logic didn't sign with them. He took that evaluation and made himself worth a shit ton more. Now Logic's worth $10 million or something around that range, because he heard what the label was trying to take from his story, right? He heard how much his story cost to a label, and then took all the cost for himself.
Yeah.
You know, so that's what I feel like. Unless the deal is lucrative to you more importantly, or to your team, to your people more importantly, then I'm not taking the deal.
Yeah.
You know, that's why that's why I love I got Jordan up there making sure that we don't take deals like that.
But
yeah, no, I wanted to chime in real quick on that too. Like from a manager's perspective, like there's a lot of people in the industry or managers that'll just like hop in and be like, let's sign a deal for our artists just to make a quick buck, and then they get shelved. The manager made his commission, they move on. Like, you know, that's the type of stuff like we see not often, but sometimes, like Mitch said, with these young kids that are coming into the industry and they want to just like have their 10 seconds of fame with their big song from TikTok, and they're blowing up and they're like got labels throwing deals at them left and right. It's like cool, like Hope and Millie, you said, like, yeah, they're gonna give them $2 million up front, but then they'll never see a penny in their life because that one song that was so big, they're never gonna have a song that big, you know, again.
We're gonna be here for a while.
We're gonna exactly, we're gonna be here for a while. You know, for me personally, you know, we're having the absolute pleasure of working with both of you and Mitch. It's like when we look at these things again, like exactly, I just echoing what Mitch said, like the terms have to make sense at all for, and I would say making it more about the music than the money is always going to be, you know, the right fit. Like whoever the person is, the label is, the name, who they've worked with before. But do you love the music? Like, cool. Like, thanks for offering me $100,000. But like, do you love the music? Because like, if anyone's gonna go to bat for you at these labels, companies, even outside of record deals, just any deal, there's so many that artists can get trapped into. It's like, okay, cool. Like, you know, that money's nice, but like, what are you gonna do for the music and the art? Because like, I would rather take way less money for someone who's gonna go to bat for my artists and our team and our mission for 10 plus years than to take, you know, like a record deal that we're going to get 20% on for the rest of our lives. We're never going to see longevity in our careers. So that for me is always got to be about the music. It's always got to be about the person and never about these deals that these people are getting thrown into because they don't understand what it means to be in a 360 deal. And there's just so many other opportunities and ways to work the industry now that record deals are they're just old school, you know, they're just not even like as relevant to me anymore. So
just to chime in here, there's a lot of things to unpack, and I'm loving the entire dialogue, right? But when we talk about record labels and artists, particularly Black or brown artists signing to major corporations, right, we have to also factor in, right, and I'm glad Hoodie Mitch brought up Jay-Z, right, and Dame, you need both. Dame Dash talks about ownership, right? And ownership is something that is often lost on our culture, our community. It's a conversation that we're having now. It's a buzzword we're having now, but we spent decades giving away our ownership. We spent decades of people looking like us taking our proverbial 30 pieces of silver to screw over other young Black artists. So it's not just these big monolith corporations. It's not just the white man. It's literally us doing the same thing to our own people, right? So there's ownership is important just as much as leverage, right? Leverage is important. The reason Jay-Z is because he is able to take his ownership and leverage his ownership with something else. Like I put a Facebook post earlier. He just made $1 billion in the last 2 weeks from ownership, right? Because he leveraged X to get Y. Right. And he's doing so, at least from the appearance of it, he's doing so to pave the way for younger people to do the same. Right. He not only sold half of his company to Square, but he got a board position in Square. You know what I'm saying? So it's leverage and it's ownership, but it's also, let's scale down or be a little bit more realistic about what it is to be a signed artist. You don't need to be a millionaire, blown up Doja Cat level celebrity. Like, let's get the idea of celebrity out of our mind. Most of us don't even want celebrity, right?
Absolutely.
We want fame and prestige. and we don't you know what I'm saying? Like I'm cool with being where I don't want people mentioning me on Twitter 1,000 times a day thinking that they have something to say about where I'm going, what I'm wearing, who I'm dating. Like I don't need that in my personal life. I don't need that level of and I can only imagine the mental strain that that has on people who live that life. You know what I'm saying? So let's get the idea of celebrity out of the world. Like you can be a working class artist making your art and making a living off of your art on your own terms, right? Like think about all the mom and pop businesses that you support in your neighborhood. The you know what I'm saying? The local cafe where you get coffee, the place where you go get the jerk chicken that you like, the bookstore where you get books. These are institutions in certain neighborhoods that have been around for years and they're making a living. You could be that in your community as an artist, right? If I get 1,000 people spending $100 a year on me, I'm making six figures. That's just 1,000 people. I don't need to have the 40, 50 million streams that Drake has for me to have a sustainable living, for my kids to go to nice schools, for me to live in a better neighborhood than I grew up in, for me to break the cycle of poverty that people in my community come from. Like, you don't need all of that. So I think we need to be a little bit more realistic about the different avenues and alternatives, right? We also don't need to be rappers all the time. You can be producers. You can have your own record label. You can be a hip hop educator. Yeah, you can. There's so many new avenues. I think the beauty of hip hop is that it's provided us all these different avenues for us to make a living and to be able to be our authentic selves, because that's ultimately what we want. It's not like, oh, I want to make a living off my art. What I hear when people say I want to make a living off my art is I want to be my most authentic self. I don't want to have to code switch 9 to 5 and have to switch and have to take my hat off or have to wear my hair in a certain way in order for me to get this bag. I want to dress how I dress, talk where I talk, wear gold fronts if I want to wear gold grills and do all of that fly stuff and still be myself and still be celebrated, appreciated, and valued and be able to make a living. So we have to start thinking about all these different things. And I see a question for me in the chat.
Yeah.
If
No, please run it. I was going to go in and ask.
Yeah, so. It says, this is Scott. Shout out to Scott who's asking. He says, I feel like unless you live in New York, Chicago, or parts of LA, education in hip hop culture or recording processes don't exist, especially for the youth. Do you see hip hop arts becoming more of a financially viable outlet in the future, much like sports are now? Yes. To the quick answer is absolutely yes. What we've seen over the last 47 years is a party in the Bronx for young people became the predominant form of youth culture around the world and is now a multi-billion-dollar industry that employs hundreds of thousands of people to be creative and authentic, right? That's what we're getting. You get Virgil Abloh working for Louis Vuitton, right? Being the head designer there, right? All these different streetwear brands that are estimated in the billions, right? Clubhouse getting billion-dollar valuation just from what hip-hop artists are doing on Clubhouse. Like, let's not get it messed up. It's hip-hop artists who are giving them this life, right? Sure. We are giving life and we are adding the sauce to everything. So that trajectory is going to continue. It's what do we do with that, right? Like, what do we do with that? Do we want to just take our little money and then run and then we continue to get exploited, or are we going to find opportunities to start kind of setting things right in the way of social justice, setting things right in the way of equity? We're using our culture, our cultural capital to get our social just due. Yeah. Right. So I think that we're going to see more of that, but the narratives and the diverse avenues of getting money have to be presented. Right. I went to a performing arts school as a high school kid, very different than the kids I grew up with in my neighborhood who went to the regular high school, who had to go through the metal detectors, who were treated like criminals. If you come from New York public schools, you already know what the vibe is, right? Like that was the majority of my kids or my friends who went to those schools. I went to a performing arts high school. So I was exposed to alternatives. I was exposed to Broadway plays and Shakespeare and this and that. Had I not been given those alternatives as a viable option for a young Black kid, I wouldn't have thought they're possible. Yeah. So if young Black youth are told, be an artist, make a beat, drop a mixtape, if that's all you're told, 9 times out of 10, if that's all you see, those are the only 2 lanes you think exist, right? But then when we start normalizing hip-hop education, when we start normalizing social entrepreneurship or entrepreneurship as a whole, when we start normalizing like being an executive and running a studio as opposed to being in the booth. When we start normalizing these alternative career pathways within the same cultural framework, you're going to start seeing more people interested, and it's going to speak to them. Like, I don't have to be a rapper to still be hip hop. I don't have to be I don't have to drop a mixtape or do a trap beat to still be hip hop. So I think we just need exposure to these different career pathways, and you're going to start seeing the industry start flooding with more and more talent. And when I say talent, I'm not just talking about creative or artistic talent like singers or rappers, but talent in terms of the human resources necessary to keep this going into, decades and centuries beyond us.
Man,
And
I
I mean,
love it.
to hit off that, I mean, can y'all hear me okay? I have to go back to these old school talking at headphones.
Yes, we could.
But going right off the what Marlon said, I went to school in like White Plains, New York. And White Plains, New York, that's the suburbs, damn near, right? And I was exposed to a different path, a different way, right? And when I was exposed to that path, right, I had a black teacher, or he was a black TA, and in that area, he was in charge of the youth bureau. And the youth bureau was in charge of basically getting together the minorities and showing them that there's other routes and other ways and narratives that we can obtain at a young age, and growing up, I seen these things in front of me, and it only made me realize that we can only change, or we can only make that setup, especially in schools, if we do it. If we go back to the places that we're from and say, hey, what can I do to teach these youth or teach these kids about all the routes that they really have to them, or what they can do to find their voice. Because in my school, right, which wasn't predominantly black, the arts was a very big thing. Was a very big thing. We still had a black history club. African American history was an honors class. Uh, Even when I went to like literature, I was in college, AP literature, and there's only a few black kids in that class, but the teacher and the curriculum is based off of also things that get inclusivity, and diversity. Is we read a lot of black artists, and we read a lot of white artists, and we read a lot of Latino artists, and we went around, and you don't see that in a predominantly black school. You don't see that may be in the projects, or like my father, he works for the Bronx School of Education. School of Education. He works for the education department for the Bronx, and they were the kids. PS 181. They were the kids that you had to walk through a metal detector at 6 years. At 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old. These kids are walking through metal detectors, right? And they're going to a class that doesn't teach them about themselves. They're going to school that doesn't teach them about their history, that doesn't teach them about their inventors or their artists all around the world. They don't teach you that unless you go to a place that has the money to do so. So it's up to the Jay-Z's, it's up to the Diddy's, it's up to the LeBrons to go back to their neighborhoods and make this history known, or it just gets forgotten. And the power is in our hands, ultimately.
I agree. I think 21 Savage also is doing something with education and just like financial literacy.
And financial literacy, yeah, he sure is.
So important, because going back to like record deals and stuff, they're preying on you because they know that their parents taught them already about finance and what to look for in deals, management, business. They know that you didn't get that. They know that you didn't go to a private school where you learned about stocks, hedge funds, and all that kind of stuff. So financial literacy is so, so important to understand and to teach your children, because the whole world is set up in a place where you're expected not to understand that. And that's why they come at these kids with these crazy deals, and they'll take it because they get a $50,000 chain. So they don't understand the way money works and the way it's a tool, a powerful tool to understand how money works, understand how credit works, understand all of that. Because then you get trapped because all you can think about is, well, I'm in the projects and I want to get out. But then you sign this deal that essentially sets you up where you're really not going to go much further. And you don't know that. And it's because we're not taught that. We're historically just set up to not know about finance. And I think it's important to take that power back by educating yourself on money and then teaching your children or whoever is around you about money too. Because that's really what this comes down to, is when they hand you these messed up deals, is that they are banking on you just to grab at whatever they offer.
True as hell. And I think that's also the unfortunate part. I mean, and I only see this as like a DJ. You know, I always joke with Jordan, I say, hey, he's going to manage my DJ career one of these days. But it's really hard for me because I feel like that's one of those nuanced parts about being a DJ, is that you see the spaces that Black culture has forged, and then you see that we're not invited to those same spaces, even though it's our work and our footwork that kind of created those spaces. Like I've realized in quarantine that I've been kind of like catfished, or the kids are calling it blackfished, where I'm like, I could have sworn that DJ was Black, and then like you see them in the virtual space, and you're just like, wait, the lights were off in the club. I could have sworn, you know, like man's got a fade, and where like I thought for sure, like it, you know, and you realize that's like. And what I'm even realizing here in the music industry, right? It's like, it's the same thing. We forge the culture, we forge the way for this space and for this content to be created, but then we're not given any ownership. We're also not even invited to the cookout when it's going down. And we're like, wait, wasn't the cookout our idea in the first place?
No, right? It's like that whole like ghetto until proven that it's art. And then it's just, you know, running off that again. If they tell you that your art is ghetto or worthless, then they can come at you with whatever deal and be like, well, this is all I'm going to get because it's really not worth that much.
Yeah.
So knowing your worth and then understanding the just the nuance of finance, I think, is so important, because that's how you get trapped, is just being, and they know that. So never think that someone is taking advantage of you and taking advantage of you and not knowing that that's what they're doing, because that's exactly what they're doing. They know what to expect. They know, like, oh, this is a good deal, you're going to get it, you know, because you're set up where they understand that you weren't given the same tools.
Yeah.
So knowing that you go into this world being such a pivotal part of every aspect of entertainment and creativity and all that they're willing to essentially steal from you, knowing that you have to arm yourself, prepared to deal with whatever that may look like.
Yeah. Goodness.
I think hip hop is so lucrative, right?
Yeah.
Hip hop is probably
it's the culture
most,
right now. It's literally the culture.
It's the most lucrative. And just like what you're saying, a lot of these labels know that this is the most lucrative. And they're thinking to themselves, which Black story can I sell for the most? Oh, his story is not Black enough.
And for the cheapest, because they want the most from it. So they're not only the best Black story for what they can get, but they're also not going to give you what its real value is.
Yeah. And it's a slave deal. It's a slave deal. You know,
it's like it's how. Oh no, what was it? No, I would say like that's Master P and No Limit, right? Like I love what he said on Salon Design, where he's like, if this label says I'm worth 10 million, then like I know I got to be worth way more than that.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like this narrative, you know, like it takes so long to like notice that there are like that there is an actual narrative for like each race, you know, but that there's a specific narrative for the African American race. You know, you can't talk about this. Oh, only talk about this. I'm not going to pay you enough if you're not talking about that. You know, like it's the things that we change, you know, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah. I want to know, you know, we want to close up shop real soon, you know, respect everyone's time. And again, I can't say thank you again for everybody that has lent their ears, you know, that are in what we call the audience, you know, that have really tuned in and want to hear this. And of course, a special thank you to the panelists. Maybe it's a word, maybe it's a saying, maybe it's a mantra. Ending and lasting thoughts, thoughts of light, thoughts of love, thoughts of progression that can move this panel forward. That anyone here on the panelists would like to share as we wrap up.
Hold on. It's 2 words. It's hold on.
Lean on other people in your circle, creativity, you know, whether they're other creatives or just friends in your community, they're your support system. And they're probably one of the most important parts of your success. Because if you don't have a good support system, if you don't have people around you you trust that are willing to hear you out and are willing to educate themselves about both your work and you as a person, what you go through, if they are not familiar, it's going to be harder for you. So you have to surround yourself with those kinds of people.
Yeah, I love that.
I would say be authentic. And I also would say the music industry owes the Black community reparations. And I think that a percentage of every blues, funk, jazz, soul, hip hop album,
Electronic, country,
yeah,
all the genres.
definitely. We rarely talk about how much money they made by exploiting Black artists, and how many families are living in a mansion somewhere because of the exploitation of Black artists. And I think a conversation about reparations from the music industry should be had.
We're gonna have to continue that in front of the people. Everything. I'm gonna put a bookmark and we can come right because yes, and yes. Our other esteemed panelists.
I would say understand trauma to heal yourself and save yourself, right? So that we can heal ourselves and save ourselves. A lot of the things that we're talking about, these social ills, stem from trauma, right? Like they stem from and what trauma does psychologically to the brain, how it informs the way that we navigate through spaces. But ultimately, I know healing is also kind of one of those buzzwords recently, but it's one of those things where you have to understand that and you have to begin that process to for us to collectively save ourselves from the situations that we're experiencing, right? Like we are our own saviors, we are the messiahs to our own movements, and we have to recognize that and be grounded in that power in order to move forward. Nothing's coming from the sky to fix this. The aliens ain't coming. Jesus ain't coming. I mean, all respect to all beliefs, but it ain't happening tomorrow. I could promise you. It may be. I don't know. But I know in the interim and in the meanwhile, we're here, right? And as we are here, we are reflections of each other's experiences, and that should give us the motivation to start kind of saving us ourselves.
Yes, 1,000%. And to the KTNA, any lasting thoughts?
You're muted, by the way.
Oh,
just I wanted to catch it early because I saw it.
I want to say that keep positive and keep pushing forward at all times. Push forward as hard and as fast as you possibly can, because we are going to be the change that we see in our own generation. And without us really pushing hard, we won't see the change we really need to see. That's my piece of advice. And mine is, if you're a Black creative, know that you are an important part of the world turning. Don't ever forget that. Don't ever underestimate or undersell yourself. Don't take no money that is below what you were, and keep on fighting the good fight.
Amazing. Malcolm, do you have any words before I wrap things up? I'd love to hear from you as well.
it's constant gratitude, and I just want to remind everybody that, you know, life is right here in the present moment. You know, now is the best time, and in some ways the past does not exist, the future is not promised, like what we have right now. So wherever you feel your purpose is right now, you're exactly where you need to be.
Absolutely. I just want to take a moment, thank every single one of you for being here. It was just amazing to bring you guys together from country, from the world. Everyone's in a different place. And I think maybe that's, you know, who knows if this would have happened if we weren't going through what we're still going through. So I'm thankful that we could do this. Every one of you mean so much to me. Marlon, this is the first time we've met, but like just hearing your words and your story, incredible. You know, make sure, just go off that, you know, check out Hip Hop for Change. Please donate to them. Check out Music Forward. Shout out to Melanie, who was here for almost all of this. Please, you know, check out Music Forward, donate to them. Check out all of these incredible people's work, their music, their art, their just passion for what they do. It's truly an honor to know each and every one of you, and I hope we can do this again soon. My two words is, as some of you may have guessed, to leave it off with, would be just to stay positive, here always, and spread that. So truly thank you guys, and hopefully we can, like I said, do this again real soon, because it was amazing.
Yeah, no, I'm putting a bookmark right where Danielle left off, the reparations for the music industry. I'm keeping it top of mind. That's all I'm saying, y'all. Stay tuned for more.
If I could give it, I would, just so I could see you again. I'm standing out here on 10, I hope the time don't end, and I can make it back to my city and feel that soul on the tip of my hands. It's getting harder to breathe.